The Progress Test in Maths, or PTM, is an update to the previous version of Progress in Maths, or PIM. All of the test items are completely new, and so is the standardization. This means that the new test measures those skills and knowledge areas that are important to students today. However, if you have been using PIM and are now moving over to PTM, you will probably have some questions about how the PIM results and data compare with PTM. In this video, I will be helping you through the transition from PIM to PTM. But first, here's Daisy Christodoulou on the importance of standardized assessment.
So I think the benefits of standardised assessments are that they allow you to compare performance between pupils and across time very, very easily. So if a pupil is getting 100 on a standard score in maths at the age of 8, and they're getting that in maths at the age of 11, you can be sure that they've made good progress between then, that they're operating at around about the same level. So I think that comparability and that ease of understanding is a huge benefit. I think they offer the most precise method of assessing. All educational assessment is subject to some element of unreliability. Nothing is perfect. But the thing I like about standard scores is that they often can build in some idea of the confidence that you can have in them. Whereas for a lot of other kinds of assessments, you simply don't know how unreliable they are. You know that they probably are, but you don't know to what extent. So I like the idea that the standardised assessments come with those confidence intervals and warn you to be careful about making judgments based on them. So I think the comparability, I think the most precise and the most accurate of the kind of assessments that are out there, and I think the as well as that, I think the granular level of detail you get from them. So what I mean by that is, if you look at the data you get from them, they're not all carved up into grades, and grades often mean that you lose information. So if you say that all pupils performing between this point and this point, we're going to call them a grade A, actually you're losing information there. So there'll be pupils who are still very different within that category who you're giving the same label. So what I like about standardised scores is you get a very fine level of detail, and you're not putting very different pupils lumping them all into the same category.
So, what are the important data and reports like for the new progress test in maths? I'll be discussing the group report, so if you have a copy of the new sample report with you, that may be helpful. These changes are, of course, reflected in the individual reports and the Excel file too. In the group report, all of the information familiar from PIM is still included, but we have updated the look and feel of it. There's your student listing with scores, and here the students are listed by standard H score. And as before, you can continue to compare and analyze the performance of different groups of students, for example, girls and boys. But some things are different. Looking at the curriculum content categories and the process categories, you can see that they have changed. This is because the standards and curricula have changed since the previous version was developed over 10 years ago. These changes are one of the reasons a new test was needed. The new PTM and the old PIM categories don't always compare directly because learning expectations have changed, and that's what these categories reflect. We would recommend using the new categories to measure performance and identify strengths and weaknesses. This ensures your data is reliable and you're tracking against current robust targets. If you do need to map back to PIM categories for reporting purposes, you may need to spend some time comparing the old and new requirements for your students, and then identify the best match for your school. The question-by-question breakdown can also help you with this. Another change that has been made is the progress categories. For the new reports, we have added 2 more categories to give you a finer, more precise level of analysis. Instead of 3 categories, lower, average, and upper, there are now 5 progress categories. Lower and much lower than expected, and higher and much higher than expected, and expected. The PIM average progress category covered a wide range of changes in performance and has now been split into 3 categories to give you a more precise picture of the direction of learning. The new higher and lower than expected categories overlap slightly with the old lower and upper categories, but these two categories now mostly match with the much higher and much lower categories. In the reports, we will provide you with the graph and the list of students with their progress category for all students who have taken the test the previous year. If a student's previous test was PIM, the previous version of the progress category is used when we are comparing PIM and PTM data. If the previous test was the new PTM, the new categories are used. So, as you're moving over, you may see these different categories in your reports. If you need to refer back to old data, combine all three categories of lower, expected and higher to match the old average category, and the new much higher or lower categories to match with the old upper and lower categories. But again, we recommend you start tracking with the new categories to make sure your data is robust and reliable and that you get the benefit of this more granular detail. Now, as mentioned at the start, we have two different tests, PIM and the new PTM. The content is different, the standardization is different. How do we know that the results are comparable? As part of test development, we had hundreds of students take both the old and the new version of the test. We found that students who demonstrated good math skills in one test demonstrated them in the other test as well. This tells us that student performance in the two tests is consistent and that the results from the two assessments can be compared. For schools, this means that you can confidently transition from PIM to PTM and trust that you're using a fair, reliable and comparable measure. More details about how we did this study and what the statistics show can be found in the technical information sheet for the PTM series, which is available for customers on our website. In this sheet, we also provide comparison tables for the standard H scores achieved in the two tests. Because there has been a change in standards since the previous edition was standardized, the position of a particular skill set on the normal distribution curve may have shifted. For the most part, the differences are 1 or 2 points and as such not significant. When analyzing data, you will also want to think about how the results have met expectations, how progress relates to the potential of each student, and if there are any discrepancies, to investigate if there are any barriers to learning. While moving over to the new edition to continue that consistent assessment practice, some of you may also be changing test formats and move from paper-based testing to digital testing. The paper test data and the digital test data are on different platforms. Unfortunately, at the moment, we are unable to bring the data together except with the help of spreadsheets. This will be available by contacting our customer services and include easy instructions for use. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or would like more information, please contact our customer services.